Welcome, everybody. Today is August 11th, 2022. It is right before school starts, and for us educational evaluation people, we are right in the thick of it. This is one of my favorite sessions, networking karma. It's a kind of a phrase that I heard somewhere, and I continue to add to the definition of. There is a book about this. There's lots of, really, we know what this is. We talk about this all the time. This is the reason why a lot of you show up to the AEA conference, or you go to your local affiliate meetings, or you go to other meetings affiliated with other professional associations. It's not necessarily just about the content, it's about the networking. And so that's what I'm going to discuss today and what that karma is. First, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about what we're trying to do in our businesses. So a lot of us, if you're on this IC topic chat, you're probably thinking about, how do I create an independent consulting practice? My own solopreneurship or firm. We talk about the Hedgehog Concept, which is a series of 3 overlapping circles of doing what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for. There's also this Japanese idea that I like to think about, and I'd like to make sure we're thinking about too. It's called Ikigai, and it adds in the 4th circle of not only doing the first 3 things, but also doing what the world needs. And so at all times, we should be finding where those 4 circles overlap, doing what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. So for me, I love education. I'm really good at data analysis. I found that a lot of the educational data analysis happens in the program evaluation world around STEM, around educator shortage, around military connected students. Those are kind of our big areas. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly with college scholarship and access. And we are providing something that the world needs, not just because there's money out there, but because we feel like what we're doing is contributing positively back to the world. At the end of the day, I have colleagues who do similar types of things as I do, but they go work for shoe companies who are, studying patterns of whatever, how people walk in and out of stores to buy shoes. And I'm thinking, do you feel like you're doing something? I feel like I'm doing something. So I feel like I'm doing something that the world needs. I feel like I am doing my little piece of saving the world, making the world a better place through the work that I do, because I'm supporting my clients, which are educational groups. So how does this relate back to networking karma? We want to spend our time, the majority of our time each day, thinking about how we're fulfilling this general mission to create a consulting practice around these 4 overlapping circles. And when you're off in a different direction, you're missing the point. A hedgehog, as Jim Collins talked about it, is a small animal that is solely focused on going from point A to point B, as opposed to a fox, which jumps around and is kind of doesn't have any clarity in its goals. And so a hedgehog has clarity in its goals, and it stays focused in the center of the 4 circles that I'm using here. So thinking about networking, I think a lot of people, particularly in program evaluation, feel like there's no way I can do this because I'm an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. It's the extroverts who go and do that networking. They're the ones who want to go talk and meet and shake hands and exchange cards and, go to these happy hours or whatever. But I'm going to make the statement and the suggestion, and I've done this before, but I think you should think about this, that the people who are really good at this work are in fact the introverts. That's because it's the introverts who spend time listening. They're not talking about themselves. They're not going on and on about their ideas. They're not thinking about, in the middle of a sentence, that somebody else is saying, what am I going to say next? They're sitting and listening and reflecting. And that's because, and that makes them better networkers, and it makes them better in the way of programmed evaluation, creating a good program evaluation for people, because they're paying attention to what the people are saying and they're reflecting on that. And I would say generally program evaluators are better, and there's probably shouldn't be a surprise to you, they're better as introverts because we really need to be reflecting on somebody else's activities, not on our own. And so you shouldn't think that you can't network because you're an introvert. I think you're going to find through some of the suggestions I give in a little bit that the introverts are really great at this because we're not asking you to do too many things that are really outside of your comfort zone. You're doing things that are natural and normal for who you are. So I like to refer to this next slide, which is kind of like my overall slide. If I only have one slide to do, I put this up there. It's not networking karma. I refer generally to Keith Ferrazzi. He doesn't use the word networking karma. He wrote this book, Never Eat Alone, which is, he's like this master networker. He's the extreme end of extroverted, at least from the way his book is written. He's always out there trying to connect with people. But he has some really important messages in there for us. And there's a bunch of different pieces to it, but I think there's two salient pieces that I like to pull out of there. He says it's all about social arbitrage and not keeping score. Okay, so social arbitrage is the general idea that you become invaluable to other people, right? You become indispensable to them. You do things to help people out, and then they need you, or they see your services as something. I'm not talking about paid services here. I'm talking about connecting with people in your community, however you define your community, then your community of evaluators. Again, remember that the 4 overlapping circles of the Ikigai. As you're connecting with people within your community, even when you don't have any projects, when you don't have any money, when you're giving back to people, when you're creating opportunities to network with people and put them in places that makes their world a better world, you are becoming indispensable to them. So they know that they need to come back to you. But the second, side of that coin is that in your connection with people and within your community, you're not asking for them to do you a favor. I'll do you a favor if. That's not the situation. You give freely of yourself. Because if you're asking for somebody to give you a favor because you provided them a favor, it becomes a currency. It becomes a commodity. You're cheapening the experience effectively, right? Because your situation is one where they have to give back now. But if you give freely, this is kind of like the whole situation in the coffee shop where you set out the can, pay what you can. In a lot of situations, most situations, I understand people pay more. So it's that same situation. You're asking people to naturally, normally, organically give of themselves back to you and to others because of the community that you're creating. This is effectively karma, right? We're asking, you're doing unto others as you have them do unto you, right? That's the golden rule. But in the karma idea, that's karma, by the way, just a quick definition. That's the spiritual principle of cause and effect, where intent and actions of an individual influence or cause the future of that individual, which is an effect. So you have, if you put good intent out there and you put good deeds out there, good things will happen to you. So have a happier rebirth, if you will. And alternately, if you put bad out there, bad things will happen to you. Now, I know that sounds crazy, and that sounds like some sort of, Eastern spiritual principle that, what does that really mean? But this really does mean something, because we're not just talking about karma, we're talking about networking, social network analysis here, right? So within a social network, we're creating bonds with people. Everybody that's here today, I have a bond with from the social networking theory, right? Even some people who are brand new. I have a closer bond with Susan Wolf and with Kurt Stuke because we've been putting this together and we've known each other for years. And I met Susan in 2011 in Anaheim, and she was one of the first people I met, she and Ann Price. And Kurt and I met, and I'm sure we met before this, but we definitely met in 2016. And so we've continued to create things and we have a lot in common. There's some other folks here who I just meeting today, so our bonds are lighter. But I try and do things for people. Everybody here knows that they could probably reach out to me and I'll get back to them and try and help them out to the best way I can. Within social network analysis, our bonds, my bonds with Susan and Kurt are thicker, right? The lines are bigger. I think they're called edges, right? And so we have really strong bonds, but by putting myself in the middle of a network of people, I know that I can give to those people, and then indirectly they're creating a connection with one another, and the network grows and grows stronger. And that's basically what we're trying to do with the IC topic chats, what we do through the Independent Consulting Topical Interest Group, or ICTIG, through American Evaluation, or whatever one of your local affiliates or other professional associations you have. But the goal here is to put yourself within the network of people that are relevant to your practice. So for me, within the STEM world of military connected students, as Kurt and I both know, there's a group of DODEA, the Department of Defense Education Activity. And so whenever possible, I try and go to those meetings. I try and connect with that program officer. And by connecting with those people and providing freely of myself beyond the contract, I know that those things are going to come back in rewards to me. Anyway, so here we are looking at the social network analysis. What we want to do is, come on, there it is, put ourselves in the middle of our network. If you have an opportunity to go to a conference, why not present? When you go to a conference, if you're presenting, why not be the chair? Why not, do a little bit of extra and become the TIG leadership? Go become, start by being involved as the web or the web person, or get involved with the program. That's how you get to know what's going on, because you're involved, you're engaged. People invite you to their meetings. They say, and at those meetings, you're talking about the relevant things, but then the other things happen, like, oh, by the way, there's this one contract coming up. Are you interested? That's how networking relates to direct business. It's not something that's maniacal or evil. We're just showing up and connecting with people. All right. I see your question, Ayanna. I want to get to that after in our discussion after we're done with the presentation. Malcolm Gladwell. Who's familiar with Malcolm Gladwell? He's one of my favorite people. I love all of his books, and I read all of his books. Yep. Thanks, Jennifer. Exactly. And Ayanna, she's familiar. He's written a bunch of books. One of his first books that really got popular was The Tipping Point. And in The Tipping Point, he talks about how you can effectively create a movement, right? And it's all the different kind of ingredients to putting together a movement. And he talked about 3 types of people that kind of affect this tipping point: connectors, mavens, and salesmen. And what we're really talking about here is connectors. Connectors are your social networkers, your they're the people who have networking karma. I think mavens probably could fit within this description to some extent, but the connector connects people to one another. And he says the point about connectors is that by having a foot in so many different worlds, they have the effect of bringing them all together. Well, that's the idea of being a social networker, being in the middle of the social network analysis. You are, in effect, putting yourself in the middle of all these circles and bringing people together. And by doing that, you know what's going on, because people come to you and they ask you questions. You've got that point of being invaluable to people. So they come to you and say, hey, I'd really like to know about what you think about such and such. Now you know about such and such, and it can inform your process. And again, focusing your efforts towards your 4 overlapping circles and being interconnected with people, it creates the opportunities for lots of new and different business. And this is truly successful for me. I mean, I don't want to go on about myself, but we've got a lot going on. I now have, as of Friday, I have an 11th staff member, and we have 37 projects with 5 that are almost certainly going to get funded. It's mind blowing. But the point is I've just continued to follow this process of staying within my 4 circles and give freely of myself. And this is what's resulted. So let's give some examples. Obviously, these aren't going to be examples specific for you, but these are ways to think about it. If you were involved with educational work or within something with literacy, it would make sense to join the library board or to be involved with, for me, I was on the University Center Board, which is a um, governance structure within the local university specific to our student union, where I was once a grad assistant. I don't know if Rotary makes sense for you, but Rotary is all about networking karma. They don't say it. If you read their 4-way test, it's really about creating an opportunity to do things for your community. Most of the people involved with Rotary are local business people who are effectively trying to sell to one another and sell to other people within the community. But they know that by doing good things within their community puts them out front in front of others. And so, like for instance, my banker downstairs, he's a member of our local Rotary. I asked for an accountant. Who did he recommend? Somebody he knows who's the secretary of his Rotary administration, who is an accountant, you know. And so I'm working with him. And I also know that if my banker recommends an accountant, that person's going to work for me. They're going to work hard because they all have a relationship with one another. That accountant can't let my banker down because they're connected. They don't want to hear that didn't work out. I put a running club in here, and I actually, a lot of you know I'm a runner. I was the treasurer for our running club for a number of years, and it helped me because indirectly, I didn't expect this, but I would help put together the 5K, or I'm sorry, the 10K events. And as the treasurer, I was responsible for sponsorships, which is nobody's favorite job. It's the last job anybody wants to do. But that process of reaching out to people and asking for sponsorships for our race helped me get more comfortable with reaching out and talking to people about my business. And so that was really helpful that way. Obviously, you should think about reaching out and being involved with the American Evaluation Association or your local affiliate. This is a couple pictures from local affiliates. And of course, the independent consulting TIG. When we meet if you're going to be there in person, in New Orleans in November, you should show up. And I know we're going to have some sort of, I don't know when, where, or how, but we will have some sort of a social event where you can connect with people there, and that's where you'll find things. And obviously the IC topic chats, we have opportunities to connect today. Hopefully you're texting each other offline or through the private chat function, get to know one another through that. That's how you do it. You post a question out on the E group, which is that listserv internal to AEA, and people will respond and they will give you information, or you provide a resource. I think that's generally how this works. So as a lot of you guys know, I like to do 5.5 ideas or tips or hints about whatever the topic is. So today, my 5.5 ideas are: first, find your people and go see them, okay? Not only find your people, but connect with them. One of the things that I think about here is when you're working with your clients, if they invite you to a meeting, if it's within reason, try and go in person. If they are going to a meeting with their colleagues, like for me, it's the National Science Foundation. If they have meetings and it's within reason, I go to the meetings with them to those meetings. I'm not necessarily required to do that, but I like to because it creates an opportunity for me, first and foremost, to get to know my client better. And what invariably happens is somebody says, oh, hey, you're an evaluator. I need an evaluator for the next grant I'm getting ready to write. And then you give them your card, and that becomes your next new client. And that happens all the time. And that's just, that's one of those little hints and tips. Give without expectation to strengthen your bonds, or those edges within a networking analysis. Again, this is not you're not keeping score. What's important to all of this is when things come up and you need help, it's not going to be a big deal for you to ask people to help you. There's not you don't work from the expectation. There's not an expectation here. But if you need some help because you've given so freely of yourself, people will logically want to be able to help you, because that's human nature. Work to become the hub, or that connector, as Malcolm Gladwell said. And don't be surprised when skills and opportunities and things come from unlikely places. This is the time of year in the education world when things are constantly popping, where you just like, they keep falling out of the sky. You're just like, where did that come from? That's because of things I did years ago. I created a connection with people. I have one of my clients who is, former clients, we concluded this grant 4 years ago, and she was happy, I guess. I never heard from her. In fact, I wasn't sure she was happy. I met with her just randomly, and she goes, "Hey, I heard you're looking for people. Is there a possibility I could come work for you?" And I was like, "Oh my God, that would be amazing. You're perfect." So we're going to have a conversation about that in the not too distant future. She's a former dean of the school. And then follow your bliss, meaning go out, enjoy yourself, right? That's kind of the whole big idea here. But you need to pay attention. Make sure you're staying within your focus areas, those 4 circles. Pay attention, listen for opportunities. And then one last thing, I think people ask me this from time to time, and they start taking notes when I say this when I'm in a session. They're like, well, how do I actually network with somebody? And I remember reading this in a book once. When you're in a room and there's, maybe there's the hot contact that you would really like to work with, the key here is obviously talk to them. You don't necessarily have to talk about work. Talk about anything. If you're sitting with a person and you don't know what to say to them, and you're like, there's that dead silence, you're like, want to create a conversation. This is a tip from the faculty member who helped me with my dissertation. He says, ask them about their most recent vacation, because almost everybody has been on a vacation, or in the middle of the pandemic would say, where would you like to go on vacation, even though you can't? That always starts the conversation. One thing to do is make sure you get their contact information, follow up with them, and then when possible, provide them with like an article or an instrument or something that you can provide to them that they wouldn't have known about, that you know about, because that's what you do. And that started the path of creating something that's valuable to them, where you can be that indispensable individual to them. All right, so thanks for listening. Here's a couple books that I referenced today. I put a question mark over the Networking Karma book because I bought it, but I'm not really sure what it's about. I bought it, I read it. It still doesn't have a lot of good thread to it, but it has the name in it, so I felt like I need to reference it. But Keith Barazi's Never Eat Alone is really a great book, and The Tipping Point's great too. We do have upcoming sessions, as Naima was talking about earlier. She's presenting next week on incorporating equity into evaluation. In 2 weeks, we've got Lauren McLean, and we'll be talking about pre-grant evaluation. And then I think Tasha is going to be the focus in 3 weeks, and Susan Wolf will be coordinating that. So with that, everybody, nice to see you. For those who are here live, we're going to stick around and chat. For those on YouTube, I'll see you next week. Nope, wrong button.